Greetings, magical mages and spiritual sages, and all of you that are listening. Welcome to the Age of the Mage podcast. Today we're on episode 42, and we're going to talk a little bit today about these timelines that are so apparent. They're bifurcating. They're in our world right now. I believe they're very major, representing two very different types of choices. And so we're talking about these two major timelines showing up. And I know there's always a multitude of smaller sub-timelines and other kinds of choices, but we're going to talk just a little bit about these two most apparent that we are seeing all around the world for each and every one of us. We seem to be coming into an energy zone that we hit just before a divergence, just before we have to choose between two ways to go, the fork in the road, and we're in this position to make the choice of which timeline to enter, which which frequency to align with, where do we go, and what do we think about this? This is what I want to talk about today a little bit. So I have already addressed this in a few different podcasts, and I know so many of you are aware of this. And there, I see it. We as a human race are being presented with this kind of crushing energy, forcing us to take a look at truth, at deception, and make some choices here so that we can not only choose for ourselves individually, which we're always doing, of course, but to choose as a collective, to choose as a race, as a species, as the earth human collective. What choice are we going to make? Because I believe we're at one of those turning points. Another one might have occurred. Some of you are familiar with the Atlantis timing and what happened there. And there's several other points in histories that we have access to through inspiration and through channelers and people who have brought us this kind of metaphysical knowledge. We are aware of other turning points similar to this, but this is major. This is a big one. And I believe it parallels these other major turning points where humans had a choice, perhaps prior to the flood that we hear about. So these are the kinds of times that I think we're living in. And I think we're all responding to that. We're feeling the pressures, we're feeling the energies. And for those listening to this podcast, I believe this audience is probably well informed. I am assuming that each of you have done various levels of research and have come to conclusions about the two timelines being presented and where you want to go. Now, in my point of view, I see one timeline as a kind of a continuance, maybe, of where we've been with some of our world leaders that maybe aren't so great. In fact, they could be worse than not so great. But they may tie in to a group, an elite group that has had quite a bit of power, if not almost total power, on our planet, in our realm, for many, many years, eons of time. And this group may be linked with extra dimensionals and interdimensional species, which I personally believe they are. And they have an agenda that is, I would say, to keep the human race subservient to them. And so that particular timeline might look like it's more secure in some ways because you see large corporations or large governments offering the masses certain kinds of benefits, different things. But what happens in that timeline is gradually you lose more and more personal sovereignty. And pretty soon that timeline could end up in a position, as I see it, where there is almost totalitarianism, there's tyranny, and the idea of free will on a personal or individual level pretty much just goes out the door. And so we have to be careful because since this group has been in charge for so very long, they have access to so many channels that we receive our information from. So in order to even discover that such these two timelines exist, many of us have had to leave those channels and do research in the back channels and alternative places in order to become informed about what's going on and even help us realize, oh, there is another alternative. I didn't know that. Wake us up, so to speak. And this has been happening. Our world is coming to this very pivotal point, and so lawfully, as it should be, everyone is being confronted with their own choices. What are you going to do? What are you going to make of this? Where are you going to go here? How are you going to choose between these two options, these three options? And it's as it should be, because what we're doing right now is we're fine tuning our alignment, and we're discovering as people where we really feel that we resonate. And so it's a tough time because we do see people we love and care about and respect sometimes choosing choices we wouldn't go that route, we wouldn't do that, and perhaps we wouldn't because we have taken that extra time to move over to alternative sources and do some research outside of those um, resources presented to us from this one um, central unit, so to speak, that loves to control information. All right. So the other timeline that we are seeing, in my view, offers a great deal of freedom. It respects free will. It's at the very core of the timeline. It's at the core, it's the frequency of free will. It's the vibration of free will and love. And so that timeline is trying to emerge and trying to be seen so badly by us, by humans, so that we can choose it, so that we can know that choice exists. And we see these timelines emerging as one, truth versus falsehoods. Everything right now is about truth versus deception. Where's the truth? Where are the falsities? We're really cast into this zone right now where this is a pervading type of energy, and we're just hit with it all the time. So that's lawful too. That's on purpose, because as this truth begins to rise up and come into the light of day and be seen and be acknowledged and be recognized, it at the same time it encourages opposite reactions. It magnetizes deception. It encourages the forces that might prefer that it stay hidden. It encourages those forces to come and try to cover it up, keep it down, don't let it be seen. So we get this constant barrage of opposites, flashing up before us all the time too. And that's normal. That's normal because it's natural law for opposites to rise together. So we're seeing that being amplified right now. So this other timeline that has this wonderful resonance of free will, I believe also offers a great deal of personal sovereignty. And this is important because I see that we're moving into dimensions and higher frequencies where the human might want to really explore some of the hidden powers they've had all along, and maybe those have been squelched, maybe those have been constrained, maybe we haven't been allowed to be aware of what we can truly do. And I think this other timeline that offers this concept of free will being so central to it and offers us growing personal sovereignty allows for those kinds of things to come in as well, not just the 3D things that we associate so often with freedom. We want those too, of course, but I think it even represents this ability to evolve and go beyond the limits many of us feel we have, that are they're illusions. We're not as limited as we think. And so this other timeline that's trying to be seen and waving its flags around and trying to get our attention, I think is really full of uh, new things for us in multidimensional ways, as well as right here on our earth. So this is a very important choice. And I have been getting asked, well, how can I align with one? I know what I want mentally. I see where I want to go. I get it. I recognize it. I know where I want to be. I know the people I want to be with, but how do I do this? Is it some kind of magical uh, process? Is it impossible? Is it just going to be by the grace of the divine source that I get there? What are the steps? I mean, how do I really take control of my choice? Once I have made that choice mentally or emotionally or intellectually, how do I actually move into that timeline? What is that about and how does that happen? So, because I'm hearing this question and even have it myself, I have been really searching and asking for inspiration to the answers. And I think I've come up with a starting point at least. I believe we to align with it, to go beyond our, maybe verbal claims that we want to be there or that we feel aligned with it, to move beyond mentally recognizing it and saying that's where we want to be and shifting our true energy, our essence in such a way that it resonates with that. It it all starts with what you can do today. It all starts with this very moment and with the body you're totally familiar with. And so I think that's good news because very often answers seem to be so etheric and so far-fetched that it's hard to grasp them. And it's we can do it, but it's nice to have this steps, some of these steps that we can really understand and we're familiar with because they're 3D steps. Now they do, of course, bridge into the etheric realms and into higher dimensions, of course. But I want to start with some of these. So I think the place to start is for everyone, each one of you, to take some time and get familiar with the two timelines. Just mentally, just become able to recognize what the two timelines have to offer and where they're going, and kind of project in your imagination and in your intellect, project where will this take me? If I step onto this timeline over here, where do I end up at the end of it? Where is it gradually leading? This is for all of us to do. We each need to do it for ourselves because I, of course, cannot force a resonance to occur in anyone else, no matter how much I might want to. And of course, I can make mistakes myself too, and I will correct my own course. No one can really correct that for me, can they? So this is so personal, and it just starts right where you are right now with some observations. Just some observations. It's not hard. You do have to be willing to have an open mind and perhaps look at the fact that the two timelines actually exist. If you happen to be locked into a mentality that only one exists, there's only one reality, then that may be your starting point to break out of that belief system and see that there are multiple realities available. And particularly right now, facing up to the fact that there are two major styles of reality being presented. All right. So this first step is just step back, take a look, do some observing, do some research, and recognize the two timelines. All right. Now, once we're through that, the next step would be to identify mentally which one do you like? Which one do you feel most comfortable on? What voices of authority would you prefer to listen to? Have you traced those voices of authority? Do you know what they truly represent? Follow the money, so to speak. Have you done that? Have you done some homework? Do you know who you are putting your trust in? Do you know what ideas you are putting your trust in? Is this getting more clear? And once that is, and you know where you want to go, all right, the next step is to flesh out that timeline. Help it to become more real. Help to see the factors that are involved in that timeline. And I'm just going to list what I would say maybe the four primary ideas about the timeline that I I perceive as the most benevolent for us as humans, this timeline of light, this timeline of free will. I'm just going to outline briefly the 4 points that I see as critical and integral to that timeline so that we can do our own thinking about those points and see where we stand. I would say number one is free will, because that timeline represents this, in my opinion, almost divine, God-given, um, natural law that the most benevolent beings and forces around us would like to see us preserve and maintain and support. This is my feeling that free will is truly a gift. And so that timeline that does attempt, there will be mistakes made, of course, and there will have to be boundaries put up for certain types of freedoms, of course. But in general, that timeline preserves and protects and even elevates the concept of free will from where we have been currently, takes it to new levels. So that's primary principle for me. That's on the timeline I want to align with. And then the second one is love. Love is truly a word that we use in so many different ways that it's hard for us to get on the same page about it, perhaps. And magically and metaphysically, love carries all the wonderful vibrations. It just houses the highest of vibrations, the highest of frequencies available to us, and it's a creator. um, it is an element. It's the central element that runs through all creation. It's the primary force that promotes creation. So it's a magnificent, magnificent force. So we want to bring it down to earth a little bit and see ways that love might show up on this timeline so we can say, okay, I resonate with that. I want to support that. So I chose 3 words here because I'm not necessarily thinking of the kind of love that we have for a soulmate or intimacy or romantic right now. I'm looking at this from a larger scale, like a collective, a human race, what we want to see happen, how we want to see love show up in this timeline for our whole species. And I chose these words: compassion, kindness, and tolerance. So we can identify with those words, can't we? We know when we're being compassionate, and we know when we're being kind, and we know when we're being tolerant. These are aspects of love that come into society and societal actions. They show up in cultures, and they bridge love together with free will. The higher, most high vibratory meanings of love need these kind of bridges we can relate to, and to link us back to free will, and shift us back and forth so that we can create laws and create healthy living in society. We need a balance of both these things. So when we show compassion, kindness, and tolerance, I think that that's a pretty accurate type of energy we would like to see and we would like to live in. We know that we would like to be treated with kindness. We would like to receive compassion. We want to be tolerated for our varying beliefs, because we will never all agree, and yet we want to have respect for our beliefs. So I believe that those components of love are just 3 of many that would show up on this timeline. Moving to the third element of this timeline. I know that we want to say it's a light versus dark timeline, but I'd like to expand on this a little bit. I believe we will continue to see the energies of light and dark no matter where we go, because this is kind of written into the natural law too. These polarities, they are what define our world, and they define our lessons, they define our growth, and they pull us towards more growth and more expansion. So I don't believe that we'll be walking away from these energies to move up in our evolution. But what we could do, perhaps, is utilize these energies in a different way. And this, to me, comes down to this point of understanding light and darkness, and understanding how to achieve balances between light and darkness, how to use forces of light, how to use forces of dark for the good of everyone and for a general uplift, a general movement upwards in our evolution. So I would say that this timeline that I preferring, I feel is most benevolent, incorporates the understanding of light and dark. And we can even understand where we fit in. There are some areas of each of our lives that we're just pure light. It's just easy for us. We are connected to the highest frequencies, and it's just the way it is. And then we all have our temptations. We all have our flaws. We all have our weaknesses where those vibrations might drop down a little bit, and we might see glimpses of shadows in ourselves, darkness. These are patterns of growth. We can use these energies in a very positive way. And so this timeline for me would allow us to come to much better understanding as a group and as individuals about the concepts of light and darkness and what that means for us as people. And the last and fourth part of this timeline that we can kind of get our heads around and kind of identify because it's practical enough and it's real enough to understand the meaning. And that's the fourth point, is that we, on this timeline, we would have the freedom to establish appropriate boundaries. So, in other words, this all falls under different categories, right? We're kind of segmenting it, but of course they all these things could pretty much be lumped underneath free will and underneath love, and that would pretty much do it. But we're trying to get some smaller points that we can actually identify in order to help our alignment move there. And so again, this is why I'm bringing up this idea of boundaries. As we make our choices to where we want to align, and the different timelines, not just this big major choice, but all these little smaller choices that will come after we've made the larger choice, we will need to know how to create boundaries that are healthy for ourselves, because this will help us have some centering, have some grounding energy as we move through these really intense times of transition. And the proper kind of boundaries will keep our space free and clear and open to those things we want to receive, maybe to truth, to light, to growth, to love. These are the things we might want to receive into our etheric space and therefore see them active in our 3D lives. And we may not want so much some of the other things that we don't perceive we want to resonate to anymore. For instance, lies or deceptions or slavery, things that we are working our way away from. We're moving away from, and we need these boundaries. We need knowledge on how to create our personal space so that we start literally living in a personal bubble that represents the big timeline bubble. And so we can kind of wrap our heads around these ideas. We want free will. We want certain aspects of love that we can understand. We want to gain a better understanding of light and darkness and how to work with that. And we want to know how boundaries affect us and when it's appropriate for us and how we can go about maintaining and creating boundaries for our new existence. And also, these boundaries will protect us and help anchor us to the timeline that we're aiming for. So, these are the 4 ideas for today. And what I would suggest is they're all hopefully things we can play around with in the 3D world. If you are choosing free will, then it's very simple. You start expressing free will. And you respect others' free will. And these include things like free speech. And you go ahead and respect that. And we learn how to, where the proper boundaries need to exist, of course. but we start opening up to the fact that we can already be living in the way that we want to be living on the new timeline. We can start doing that right now, today, in our lives and in our personal space. The same with these ideas of love. If we want to be living on a timeline that's just expressing kindness, compassion, and tolerance, well, where do we start? We start today in our own world, in our own life, in our own little corner, reminding ourselves, here's an opportunity. I can either be nasty and mean, or I could be tolerant. Here's an opportunity. I could be kind, or I could be abrupt. The more you work with these energies in the space you can control, it shifts your vibrations into the alignment to the large timeline that you want to be on. It's not as complex as it might seem. You very quickly adjust your own vibrations moment to moment. And the longer we sustain a certain type of vibration, like kindness, then it gets to be stronger in our personal field until pretty soon you won't even feel good in an environment that doesn't sustain that energy. It just will feel out of line with you. And you'll naturally move away from it, and you'll naturally move towards the type of energies and environments that are aligned with you. And this is where this alignment happens. This is what ensures that you get on to that timeline that you can see with your eyes and you can perceive opening up and you're aware of intellectually. But this is exactly how you move on to it. Understanding of light and dark balance, just start thinking about this in your day-to-day life. Does that bring light into my life? Wonderful. Bring it in. Is that a dark spot I need to examine? Great, do it. Clear it up, shine some light on it. Just start doing that. What'll happen is you will start aligning with others who are doing the same thing. And that again scoots you right onto that timeline. And lastly, this understanding of appropriate boundaries. We need to do this already. This is something that I have spoken of, and please feel free to go back to some of the earlier podcasts where I talked about creating etheric fields for yourself, filters and shields. So this can be done magically, of course. This can be done through spiritual guardians that you call in to help you with. And this can be done in real world ways. Any way that you start getting an inspiration to improve healthy boundaries for yourself, please act on it. Please start doing it, because it will relieve you. Living in a space that you have created, that you have decided to fill with light and love and these elements that we're talking about today, they will start repelling those elements you don't like and those things that are bombarding you that are not good for you and are not healthy, of course. And so you will start feeling immediate relief if you remember that you are entitled to personal sovereignty. That's what boundaries are about, in a way. It's about forming your own little nation right around you with the principles you believe in and filling up that space with those ideas. And you're free to do that. And that freedom is another integral part of the timeline you want to be on. And so, as you do it more and more in your life, you will more and more align with that larger timeline that supports that. All right, so these are just a few ideas for today. I'm trying them in my own life, and on days that I just sink down, and I don't feel very optimistic, all I have to do is pick one of them, start focusing on it for a little bit, and I'm lifted. I'm lifted up. They work. This is why I'm passing them on to you. These are principles that appear to be working for me, because when large scale things are going on in the world like they are right now, sometimes we can just feel so small and we can just feel like there's nothing we can do. What can we do? We can do so much, because what you create in your personal sphere is going to spread outwards from you. But it's also going to help you immediately. It's also going to bring relief and open channels and doorways to inspiration that you should be getting and that are blocked when we are in more troubled spheres. So all of it's important because it just starts feeding you immediately and it's moving you towards the alignment you want. It's just, these things will definitely be steps that will solve a lot of issues for us, I believe. And I'm excited to share them with you. I'm happy to be able to share them with you. And I've been putting them to the test. So they're working. And that's why I decided it was time to talk about it a little bit more. I thank you all so very much for listening and being here with me. This is a fun journey we're taking together, if not full of surprise and interest at the time and excitement. We're seeing a bit of chaos magic, aren't we? But that's all right. It's all right. It's all part of the universe and the complex system we are so privileged to be a part of. So I will leave you for now and wish you the very best of luck with trying these ideas. Let me know what you think. And we'll be back soon. And I'll say goodbye for now.